Hey friends, it's Georgia and Belle from LilaLoa. Do you want to start making decorated cookies but don't know where to begin? This is the video for you. I'm going to walk you through every step of making my famous chocolate sugar cookie recipe. It doesn't spread and it doesn't need to be chilled. I'll give you different ways to roll out your cookie dough to a uniform thickness. And stay tuned to the very end because I'm going to share with you my secret for making sure that your cookies are fully baked but not burned. Let's get to it. Place slightly softened butter, shortening, and sugar in the bowl of a standing mixer. If shortening is not available, or you just have an aversion to it, you can substitute it with butter. Shortening keeps the cookies tasting fresh, longer, but it won't affect the overall flavor of the cookie. Cream the butter and sugar together until they are fully incorporated. You will find a link to the full recipe in the dialog box below this video. I'm actually making a double batch of dough in this video because I have a very large stand mixer and it's easier to see what is going on when there are more ingredients in the bowl. If the butter gets stuck in the flat beater, just push it out and keep mixing. I cream the butter and sugar together until you can no longer tell one from the other. Keep an eye on the bottom center of the mixing bowl. This is where the last of the sugar resistance hangs out. As soon as it's all fully mixed in, you can move on to the next step. Overmixing at this point can lead to spreading problems while baking. It's a good idea to use the ingredient shield that comes with a stand mixer, so things don't come flying out at you or any small child that might be standing by hoping for spare bits of sugar. See how the butter and sugar have become all one mass and there isn't a pile of sugar in the bottom of the bowl? That is exactly what we want. I like to scrape it all down to the bottom before adding the next ingredients. Add the eggs, vanilla, salt, and baking powder all at once. Then turn the mixer on to a medium speed and just mix that stuff up until it's all gloppy and weird. But, you know, uniformly gloppy and weird. If you have dough at the top of the beater blade, again, just scrape that down and start mixing it all together. Once it all looks like it's exactly the same, uniformly gloppy, go ahead and add the cocoa powder and then mix again. When I mix cocoa powder or flour into my cookie dough, I will actually turn the mixer on and off really quick so it does kind of a slow stir. I'll do that a couple of times before turning it on for real. It reduces the mushroom cloud of despair that will eventually settle all over your kitchen. Please don't even pretend that you don't know what I'm talking about. When it's all mixed together, lower the bowl and then spin the flat blade until it gives you a good space for adding the flour. I like to add the flour all at once. If this is the first time you're making this recipe, however, add all of the flour except the last cup. Flour does different things at different elevations and humidity points, so it's important to figure out the right amount of flour for your location. Again, you notice how I'm turning the mixer on and off slightly just so it gives a slight stir before mixing it all together. Turn the mixer onto level 2 and then mix until you can no longer see the flour. Apparently, KitchenAid recommends that you never mix cookie dough or bread dough on any level higher than 2, so make sure that you follow that rule if you want to keep your KitchenAid in good working condition. And remember, there is a link below for the full recipe. What you want is a dough that sticks to itself. It should pull away from the side of the bowl and start to weirdly climb up the center of your standing mixer like the bowl is lava or something. If the dough is sticking to the side of the bowl still, you need to add a little more flour. If you are making it for the first time and left out that last cup of flour, add it to the dough half a cup at a time until it holds itself together. You might even need to add an additional half cup of flour if it's still sticking together. Really quick, I want to talk about using flour to roll out your cookie dough. If this is all you have, it will work, but it's not ideal. Every time you roll out the dough, you're going to be adding more flour to it. You can generally only roll the dough out twice before you've added too much flour and need to toss the dough or risk having really dense, tough cookies. And even on the first roll, flour can get in the layers of the dough and create air pockets that rise up while baking, leaving bubbles in the surface of the baked cookie. Take a ball of dough from the bowl and place it on some parchment paper. Gently flatten it with your hand. Cover with a second piece of parchment paper. Probably the most widely available method for achieving uniform thickness in your rolled out dough is to place 2 objects of identical thickness on either side of the parchment paper. The objects will keep the rolling pin from flattening the dough any thinner than the objects themselves. As you may have noticed, parchment paper tends to slide around on your work surface as you roll out the dough. You can either try holding the parchment with one hand while rolling with the other hand, or just place a silicone baking mat underneath the bottom layer of the parchment paper. See? Much better. You can also use rolling pin rings to keep your dough an even thickness. Choose a ring that is as thick as you want your cookies to be. Place one on each end of your rolling pin. Be careful not to push too hard with the rolling pin, or you can compress the rings with your Herculean effort and end up with thinner cookies than you'd like. Another option is to get a rolling pin with a built-in dough guide. This precision rolling pin is one solid piece of wood and currently comes in 2 different thicknesses. I saved my personal favorite method for last. This is a dough easy rolling mat. Place a ball of cookie dough on the center of the right side of the silicone mat. Gently flatten with your hand. The plastic guides go on either side of the dough. You can put them inside next to the dough or under the silicone mat. Fold the left side over the top of the cookie dough and roll the dough until it reaches the thickness of the dough guides. Then open the mat and place a sheet of parchment paper on top of the dough. Fold the mat closed again and flip the entire thing over. The parchment paper keeps you from cutting into the mat with a cookie cutter, and flipping it over allows the dough to release easier. Bring a parchment-lined baking sheet as close to the dough as possible. So you don't end up walking around your entire kitchen with a circle cutout that turns into an amoeba by the time you make it to the baking sheet. Press down firmly on the edges of the cookie cutter. If the dough stays with the cutter, great. Move the cutter and the dough together and drop them on the baking sheet. For all other cutouts, remove excess dough and then slide a thin knife or spatula under the cutout to help transport it to the baking sheet. Keep cutouts of a similar size on the same baking sheet. Do not mix large and small cookies together as they take a different amount of time to bake completely. Also, and this is very important, do not crowd your baking sheet. I know it's super tempting to just squish a few more cookies on there, but crowding the baking sheet will make your cookies spread. So place your non-crowded cookies into a 375-degree oven and bake for 7 to 10 minutes. Baking times will vary based on the thickness and size of the cutout. So you're probably wondering, how in the world you'll know when a chocolate cookie is done? Here's the secret. Watch the surface of the cookie as it bakes. About 3 minutes into the baking time, the surface will look glossy and wet. As the cookie continues to bake, the outside edges will start to look dry. The wet area in the center shrinks, and when it has disappeared completely, leaving the entire surface of the cookie looking dry, the cookie is fully baked. Watch the surface and time for the first few batches. You'll soon figure out just how long your cookies need to bake for your thickness and size. Allow the cookies to cool completely before decorating. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave your questions in the comments below and subscribe for more great tutorials and tips.